You're listening to the Monday Night Community Show with Daniel on BRFM.
To Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. Dave, it's always good to see you here at BRFM.
It's always good to be here, although I would have expected in June, like you, that the sun would have been shining outside behind us rather than the miserable day that we've still got.
It looks like a winter's day at sort of, 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something.
So it's June going on November, it appears.
Yeah, I think so.
It feels like it just outside as well. But
all those long nights we're losing, that's the trouble.
Absolutely, but it's lovely to be here again. As I say, thank you for inviting us.
I know, Dave, we're going to talk all about water now.
A very topical, or should I say, given tonight's weather, tropical subject.
Well, yeah.
I apologise for the poor jokes, but it's a topical 5-letter word that's becoming increasingly important over the last couple of months since the hosepipe was introduced. And you'd be forgiven for thinking at the start of the kind of weather we've all been experiencing over the last few weeks, they might say, drought, what drought? But allotmenteers are this year on this particular band that we're all in the same boat, as all other gardeners are in the drought-designated areas, of which we're still one, of course, with Southern Water is concerned. And many of our members have been using water butts, or for that matter, any decently sized container to store water. Dustbins, for instance, plastic dustbins. As a horticultural society, we actively encourage members to store water in butts on their plots and to water sensibly. And I think that's very, very important, sensible watering. It amazes me just how much water, for instance, can be collected from a small sloping roof on either a shed or a greenhouse. Yeah. I've got 6 butts at home. I've been out and bought a couple deliberately because of the hosepipe ban. But it's amazing, they're all filling up, and I'm now looking for other receptacles to put water in, which is a good thing in effect, because you're storing much more water for that time when eventually the sun hopefully does come back out again. But there's no point in generally spraying water over bare soil, as it evaporates away rather quickly. And the plants simply can't use it quickly enough. And it's best to water, as you've probably heard and I've said before, and many gardeners will tell you, it's best to water at the cooler times of the day, i.e. in the early morning, or more especially in the evening when the plants have a greater chance of taking up more water overnight.
Dave, you've been talking all about water. What about established plants?
Well, established plants, I would suggest, don't need the daily watering, as you want the roots to go deep in search of water, in search of their own supply of water, and so establish a good, strong root system and a stronger plant, basically. One good soaking, maybe a week, to the base of the plant is basically more than sufficient, I would suggest. About a gallon for a largish plant. A lot of the plants, of course, will survive on their own. Some of my plants in my garden, I've not touched them at all, and they survive very, very well.
So by watering them regularly, you could kind of make them self-reliant on your watering?
Absolutely, yes, and they could supply themselves with shallow roots, which, of course, will rock a plant, give a wind or what have you. It could blow the stuff over. It could blow the plant over itself. So it's a good idea, for instance, if the plant's been recently transplanted from a pot, to partially bury that plot that it came in. Partially bury the pot that it came in. Sorry, I got plots all over the place. Partially bury the pot that it came in next to the root system. That way the plant gets the water it needs where it needs it the most, i.e. at the roots. It also means that when you need to feed the plant, and here I'm specifically thinking of tomatoes, everybody grows tomatoes, either in pots or in the ground itself. The water is at the best place for that plant, along with the feed that you're putting into the pot. Another idea that many of our members have adopted is to apply a mulch of leaves or grass mowings around their crops. It's a great use for, you've taken the grass, you've cut the grass, you've mowed the lawn. What am I going to do with it now other than throw it away or put it in a compost bin? Put it around the plants because it provides a mulch. And if you're putting in new plants, like summer bedding plants, it's also a good idea to incorporate moisture retentive materials, the gels and things like that. But specifically something really cheap like newspaper underneath the plant, in the plant hole. Specifically, I'm thinking here of runner beans, because they're water greedy. Water greedy plants will need that moisture retention. And that method, i.e. putting newspaper underneath or putting paper underneath, burying it beneath the plant itself, will serve them well. The paper will hold more moisture and will eventually rot down, giving you a better soil structure anyway. But gardeners are great at labour and time-saving ways. We all want sort of shorter methods of doing things and keeping their plots well watered. I'm sure there are many who are now not just pouring the shower or bath water down the drain. This is the so-called grey water that everybody was talking about. But they're using it on their established plants to supplement the rain. Not that we seem to need it at the particular moment. I know we keep coming back to this subject, but there you go. And I'd advise, though, against putting so-called grey water over food crops. Water from dishwashers, washing machines, or greasy, oily water from the washing up bowl. It doesn't do to put that water onto food crops. But established plants shouldn't mind the occasional drenching from this particular source. One last thing, if you've got hanging baskets, it's something we were talking about while the record was playing. Heavily planted pots these days tend to dry out very quickly, even given the weather we've got at the moment. So it's a good idea to incorporate those moisture-retaining granules or gel in the compost. But water, as we've said here, and over this very long answer, you mentioned one word, water, and you can chunder on all the night long about it. But water at the moment is a very big talking point, and there's many inventive ways employed by gardeners in saving it.
We are this evening talking to Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society right here at BRFM on the Monday Night Community Show. We're talking to Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society, and one of the things we always cover when you're coming up here is if you're planning to go in the garden over the next couple of weeks to cobble the allotment, what can you be getting on with?
We're both smiling at this one, aren't we? It follows on naturally from what we've been talking about. But, as I say, it follows very neatly from your previous question, as it's all very much down to the weather. But I see from today's weather forecast that we're in for more of the same cool, changeable conditions we've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks. But, however, having said that, there's still a lot that can be done in the garden and has to be done still on the allotment when time and weather permits and allows. On the vegetable side, there are the more tender plants to be put in, such as tomatoes. My tomatoes, for instance, have just gone into the ground. French beans, squashes, courgettes, marrows, and the long-term plantings such as leeks, broccoli, other brassicas and sweet corn, those which wouldn't have survived if you put them in earlier in the year. Also, there are plants that could be put in as succession sowings. Lettuce, radish, beetroot, carrots and things like that. Vegetables like that. On the flower and ornamental side, greenhouses, nurseries, garden centres, whatever you want to call them, they're absolutely brimming. You've probably seen this on your trips out.
Yep.
They're absolutely brimming with summer bedding plants for window boxes, pots, hanging baskets, things like fuchsias, begonias, bedding dahlias, busy lizzies, petunias, geraniums, pelargoniums. Personally, I think a display of bright scarlet or crimson geraniums or pelargoniums in pots at this time of the year are absolutely stunning. I managed to keep quite a few of mine alive over the winter, and they're just coming out now. Beautiful, beautiful red colouring. If you can keep them dead-headed, they'll reward you with a flower display throughout the summer months. And coming back to water again, they have another advantage, of course, in that they're drought-tolerating due to the fleshy leaves that they actually have. They originally came from South Africa, so they are used to sunnier climes, or they have the ability to tolerate some drought. But over the last months, many garden centres and nurseries have been selling more drought-tolerant plants. In fact, if you go to garden centres now, you see there's a specific or a designated area which says we are sun-loving, drought-tolerant plants. So a lot of garden centres are turning on to the fact that we have to use water more sensibly. In my own garden, I have several low-growing bushes which have flourished over many years, tolerating both drought and sometimes wet conditions. Things like Pittosporum, that's one of the plants which will do well in coastal areas. It's very coastal tolerant, it's very sea tolerant, sea salt tolerant. Mahonia is another one. It's an evergreen shrub. It's got those tough, leathery, holly-like leaves. Probably you will recognise it with a bright yellow flower spike earlier in the year. And in fact, the branches can also be cut. If you can't find any holly, I used to cut my Mahonia sometimes, just trim it and prune it and use it as a substitute for holly. So it's a good doer in that sense. For a slightly taller shrub, there's myrtle, again an evergreen with small shiny leaves. It has a sweet smell, from both the white flowers, which appear in July and August, and the leaves when crushed. It's a lovely, lovely smell. You can walk past it, take a handful of leaves, rub it, and put them up your nose, and it's a lovely natural smell that you're actually getting. The point of these shrubs, and others like them, is that they can be left to put down their roots and get on with growing without too much attention, apart from keeping them neat and tidy.
We are this evening talking to Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society right here at BRFM 95.6 this evening.